Well, while the Supreme Court is not very popular right now, it turns out science is even less popular, which, like, I knew that since high school. Science is terrible. I'm just joking. It wasn't my best subject, but some new polling shows that as a whole, Americans increasingly don't trust science, and that becomes even more true when you look at it from a partisan lens. They found in a new poll by FiveThirtyEight that the share of Americans who said they had a great deal of confidence in the scientific community by party affiliation dropped significantly between 1973 to 2021. They've got a graph that we'll put up in our show notes. But basically, it kind of goes as you might think. The left tends to have more faith in science and support for it, and the right is drastically decreasing expediently.
Yeah, you can look at this graph and you see that over the last 5 years, and it's when they've been framing it as faith in science. But what was interesting is the polling question actually asked, do you have faith in the scientific community? And those are two different things. So they've been using this data to frame it as if Republicans are anti-science, because as of 2020, only about 30% of Republicans said they had trust in the scientific community, while Democrats, it skyrocketed up to 65%. And just a few years ago, they were pretty similar, actually. As of 2015, they were only Republicans about 35% trusted science or the scientific community, and Democrats about 43% did. So this has been a radical shift in the last few years. But they're trying to frame it. The media, FiveThirtyEight is like a left-leaning polling media outlet. They're trying to frame this as the people who oppose science, the Republicans, are, this is a quote from the article, are anti-intellectualism. And the Democrats are pro-intellectualism. And they're essentially saying that this is all political and it's all partisan. And my first thought is that there might be a grain of truth to some of that, but science sort of killed itself over the last few years. Its own credibility, right? I mean, just think of somebody like, right, all the scientific public health community and the experts that we saw on TV telling us that if you want your kid to go to school, you're killing grandma in 2020. Yet then all those massive BLM protests in the street, they just were numb and silent about whether those might spread COVID. We've very clearly seen both a politicization of science and also like just a huge credibility crisis. Like the FDA and the CDC, they made so many botched decisions during the pandemic, like flip-flopping on things like masking. They put out a testing kit early on in the pandemic that didn't work, and they made it illegal to use a different testing kit. And then they had to repeal that all a few months later. And then I know, like you've talked about, tell us about Dr. Fauci, right? What has he done that might have caused this decline in trust in the scientific community?
I hate that little shrimp. I mean, the thing is with Fauci, and this is true, I think, of a lot of people on the left and the people that they want to label as the experts, is that the experts were never following the science. They were following their political party, and they've got a lot of like just groupthink going on. They have a lot of hubris going on within it. And it's almost been kind of a fascinating scientific study to watch them and how they've behaved, because you can see these mechanisms at play where they're so in their own bubble, they're so in their own community, they can't even be made to believe that they might be wrong about some things, right? Like, and so that's what's been on display for the past 2 years. You've had all of these people paraded out as experts that were anything but, and that we're certainly not actually following the science. You know, you don't have to be a scientific expert to read basic data around masking, around lockdowns, and to understand that what they were pushing was not going to help and that they were actually blocking things that could be more helpful. So I think that they really did torpedo their own credibility during that time period. And it was kind of like their moment in the sun. You know, I mean, most people are not paying attention to the scientific community and those experts most of the time. They're back in their labs, you know, doing God knows what, testing mice, hotboxing mice. I just wrote an article about that recently about a new study that came out. But like, they're doing these kinds of things behind the scenes. COVID brought them into the limelight, and they were not ready for it. They weren't ready for the spotlight, and they really failed drastically, and there were real lives that were harmed as a result of that. So I think that it makes total sense that trust in the experts in the scientific community has declined, and I think scientific communities have a real examination to understand that it's kind of like Hollywood. They've gotten so far left. They are so entrenched. They are so in their own ideological bubble that they sound like crazy people to the rest of the country, and they have no idea how to speak to people or how to actually, what should ultimately be their goal, help keep people safe by getting them to trust them and getting them to want to follow their instructions. So they're kind of useless at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing. I would say to people, like the scientific community, if you're looking at this data and you are complaining, oh, people don't trust us anymore, this is a disinformation issue, it's like, you should look in the mirror. Take some accountability for what role you played in this. Because this is the same thing why the media has like super low ratings and the approval ratings, the mainstream media. And they'll say, because Trump was mean to us. And he was mean to them. Sometimes he went too far. But like, no, people don't trust you because of your own choices and reporting and bias and lack of transparency. Like you and I in base politics, we come from a clear position, pro-liberty, pro-markets, pro-freedom, right of center, but we are not claiming to be neutral like they do, right, or claiming to be apolitical like they do. And people hate that. People can smell that. And so that's why the polls are cratering in trust for these people. But I will say to people on the right, there is a healthy skepticism of experts and science. And then there's like an unhealthy level of it, where all of a sudden anything they say is not true because they were wrong about X, Y, or Z. Whereas the truth is, like most people, scientists aren't perfect and they make mistakes, and some of them are, corrupted or partisan, but some aren't. And so you've seen people like, for example, conservative radio hosts who are so anti-Fauci that they refuse to take the COVID vaccine, and then they die of COVID. And that's heartbreaking because while the vaccine doesn't stop the spread, it does very seriously reduce the risk of hospitalization or death, which is a real benefit for people who are elderly or have a condition or put them at risk from COVID. But it's like a lot of people have become so anti-expert, so anti-science, that they can't even make the decisions that are best for themselves anymore. And I'm like, at that point, that's a real own goal.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you and I talked about this. I guess we didn't have the podcast at the height of the vaccine wars, but you and I were talking about this a good bit behind the scenes and about how to carry ourselves and how to navigate that online. And the thing is, you and I both kind of came down on the side of like, we both got the vaccine and don't think it's perfect by any means, but like, I've never understood like the hatred towards Pfizer for developing what could be a life-saving vaccine for many, many people. I understand the animosity if you're going to be forced to take it. I understand, that political debate, and I very much sided with people who should not have to get it if they didn't want to get it. But the animosity towards the pharmaceutical companies and vaccines and medicines, like I don't understand, and I still see a good bit of that on the right, where it's like, if you don't want to take it, by all means don't. I honestly didn't want to take it right away. I remember I told you I was going to wait for it to be out a little longer, and really ended up taking it mostly because my sister was having a lot of anxiety and concern for the family, and I was like, it'll make her feel better, like I'll go ahead and get it. And so I did, but like as a whole, like that kind of trend, I was at a healthcare event in New Jersey the other week, and it was on healthcare, and I was there talking about, getting rid of certificate of need and direct primary care and all these things that could make healthcare more affordable and easy to access and really improve our system. And then a lot of my counterparts were there, like going after the vaccine, and I was like, this is what we're doing at this event, And so there is that strand there where I think people have taken it to an almost like conspiratorial level where like the experts have misled you, and that's true, and the government has lied to you, yes, and people have tried to force things on you that were not helpful, and all of that's wrong. But then like it can go to this extreme where it's like all medicines are bad, all vaccines are bad, pharmaceutical companies are bad. And like, do I like the relationship, the crony relationship between healthcare or pharmaceutical companies and the government? Absolutely not. But on the other hand, the problem is government. We have to fix government to where they don't feel like they have to go play that game, right, to compete, and actually make it to where government can't give special favors to certain companies. That's a problem with government that we should be going after the politicians on versus Pfizer. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. And I will say, like, this, I was raised Southern Baptist, I was homeschooled, like I've seen a lot of this growing up. I kind of was raised in some of it, sorry mom, but like, my parents sometimes had what I would say were some anti-scientific takes. Like they didn't want me to learn about evolution growing up. So when I was homeschooled, I never was taught evolution. I don't know if I ever told you that before, but I was never taught evolution. They believed in creationism and like things that aren't really backed up by science or history. But that's just an example. So I have seen some strains of this throughout my life, being from like conservative evangelical right, where like I'm not surprised that it's getting to this level because I think the roots were always there to some extent.
Yeah, that's really interesting, the religious aspect of it, because I respect people's beliefs and their right to have whatever belief they want, but sometimes I don't understand how people can believe the things they believe. So I was actually recently listening to a Ricky Gervais special, the British comedian, and I love him. He is outrageous, very offensive, but in a way where it's like he's poking the bear, but he's not coming from a bad place ever. But he's a big atheist, and so he talks a lot about his problems with religion. And I don't know much about religion, so I'm not out here saying he's right or he's wrong, or this is right and that's wrong. But apparently, some people genuinely believe, some Christians, not all, but some, that the Earth is only 5,000 years old. And I don't really understand how someone can believe that, because it's objectively untrue. Like, there's so many scientific facts in front of us now. Like, you can, no one can disprove your belief in God, your belief in Jesus, your belief there's a creator, any of this. That's all your belief and your view. But I struggle to understand how people can believe things that are obviously false. Like, for example, he jokes about the story of Noah in the ark and fitting two of each animal into the ark. And he's like, well, there are about 5 million species. And I know a lot of Christians wouldn't take that biblical story literally, but some do. And I don't know how you can believe that someone fit 5 million animals, actually 10 million, into an ark. Yeah. And also, why didn't they eat each other?
Because his animals were nice. They were blessed by God. No, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. Like, there's some Christians who would say, like, those early Genesis stories are a metaphor, and there's others who, like, literally believe them, and that's kind of like, and same thing when you get to creationism. There's, I believe they call it, like, New Earth creationists and, like, Older Earth creationists. So, like, some people have a more, like, realistic view of how long the Earth's been here under creationism. Some have a shorter view. But I have a funny anecdote about this. I remember I went on a date with a guy one time. I was seeing him in California, and he was, like, a lefty. We were hanging out, and he found out, like, I was Christian, and he was like, oh my gosh, like, you don't really believe all that. And I was like, what? Yes, I do. And he was like, so you don't believe dinosaurs are real? And I was like, yeah, I believe in dinosaurs. He's like, no, Christians don't believe in dinosaurs. And I was like, what? Yes, we do. But I started researching it, and turns out there's a sect of Christians who, like, literally don't believe in dinosaurs because they are New Earth creationists, and the time frame doesn't work out to match with the, like, scales. They have a whole conspiracy to, like, explain away dinosaurs. Like, it can get into these really fringe places. And I just want to say, like, as somebody who is still religious, you don't have to buy into everything organized religion tells you to be religious or spiritual. There's these things have been, organized religion's a crapshoot. It's been made up mostly by politicians and passed down through generations. And this is true of almost all religions, where, like, I really just can't stand the, like, structures of them, because I think they force people to not ask questions, to not use their minds. That's something I had a lot. I mean, I'd always say, I can be a Christian and have logic. I can be a Christian and believe in science. I can be a Christian and, like, push back on some things that the church believes, you know? And I think that's important for people to have that kind of ability to break away from, like, being indoctrinated by some of these things and learning to think for themselves and saying, like, I can believe in God, I can believe in Jesus and have a relationship there, or whatever your religion is, while still recognizing that these facets of the system or the religion don't make sense.
Yeah, and I've learned more as I've started to learn more about religion from getting close with you and your background, and also my partner. He's Christian, and he grew up a Christian and seriously, and he believes. And so I've learned more, and I've realized that I will never again make the statement, Christians believe X.
Yeah.
Because actually they don't. They have very different beliefs, and there's so many sects, and there's different beliefs held, and disagreements within denominations, across denominations. And it's like, so I think one of the problems is attempting to generalize too much to what Christians believe or what evangelicals believe or whatever. But on some things, yeah, I do think the anti-science element of it is hard for me to personally get on board with. But that's the great thing also about America, is I don't have to get on board with your religion as long as you don't force it on me, and I won't force anything on you.
Yeah, that's actually, it's really good to think about Christians like libertarians. They agree on basically nothing. So much in common, and yet so much to fight about. Like, that's even really churches, funny. Like, same denomination will split over like a minuscule issue. Like, okay, this is a funny story, but, like, my dad does not believe in the rapture, which is something that the Left Behind series taught. I don't know if you remember that. It was really popular when we were younger, but like there's this whole book of Revelation, like this dispute in Christianity about whether or not people will be like, if you're a Christian, some people think there's going to be this rapture where basically God comes in and takes all the Christians up out of the earth and the rest of you are left to deal with like the end of times. And then there's other people who don't believe in the rapture. And my dad does not believe in the rapture. He thinks Christians will go through the end of times. And like,
I hope he's right.
People have left his church over this. like literally left his church over this. Churches have split over this factor. Like, this is what I'm talking about. So yeah, Christians, they fight about a lot.